In today's video, I'll be taking you inside the US-China tech war. I'll be shedding light on what's really going on behind the scenes, and I'll end by clarifying who I believe is currently on top and where things might be heading. Before we dive into it, do make sure you hit the like button and subscribe. World Order is a channel that covers all things geopolitics, macroeconomics, and tech. I also do the World Order red and black labels for those interested in more highly produced forms of storytelling. Without further ado, let's dive into it. So the story begins in the late 90s, early 2000s with China joining the WTO, or the World Trade Organization. This was a really optimistic time. The World Trade Organization had originally been established as the GATT. Its founders envisioned a world free of war and instead pushed them to go into things like trade with one another and investing in each other. And by growing in kind of these positive sum kind of ways, everyone would grow more peaceful and more prosperous together, okay? It was like part of the globalist mission to take part in this. So when China joins in the late 90s, everyone's hyped, okay? Because this has been building for a long time. The seeds for this had been placed by Nixon and Kissinger, and then it really started to flourish later with Carter and Deng Xiaoping. A study by the Louisiana State University released in 2003 demonstrates just how real the optimism was. Having gathered 282 articles from various regional newspapers, the study found that coverage was predominantly positive, focusing on the potential economic benefits aligning with the government's favorable stance on China's WTO accession. The document wasn't without warning, by the way. It did warn about the loss of manufacturing jobs that many Americans might face. But on the whole, people were very welcoming of the free trade liberalism that came from all this. During the 2000s and early 2010s, China saw incredible benefits from this arrangement. Its exports grew fivefold, and come 2009, it had overtaken Germany to become the world's greatest exporter. You see foreign direct investment boom during this time. And much of this is because there are these global trade rules that many investors now believe that China would start following. China had already begun seeing productivity growth after the rise of Deng Xiaoping in the late 70s, but its accession to the World Trade Organization helped skyrocket its gains exponentially. Things like the war on terror or the great financial crash were seen as little bumps in the road. They weren't truly derailing this globalist project, this kind of globalist enterprise where America and China, two great powers, are steadily coming together and working on positive sum gains. This is a really optimistic. I think people will look back on the neoliberal era, and when I say neoliberal era, I'm talking about early 80s to maybe early 2020s, right? That I think they'll look at that as one of the most optimistic, best times in history, honestly. I mean, it's practically unheard of before then for great powers, which China and America both are, both today and historically. It was practically unheard of for great powers to interconnect their markets. It was seen as almost ridiculous, nonsensical to do that, because no matter how much you integrate, there's going to be that great power tension, that egotism that still makes these countries suspicious of one another. People like John Mearsheimer were warning about this from very early on, and yet there were enough liberals to push for this. And why not? Why not? The Cold War had ended. Why not see how far we can take this neoliberal franchise? And I included. I totally bought into this. I wanted to see it work. Things were, for the most part, rosy, and this took many forms, be it Hu Jintao's visit to the United States in 2006, Obama's visit to China in 2009, and the fact that by 2012, China had become the US's second largest trading partner. These are some really interesting facts, guys. Now, this is where the story takes a turn for the worst, because it's, things are really good at the start. Okay, in this story, things are great at the start. During the 2000s, early 2010s, man, sick times. But then in 2013, you get Edward Snowden, running away from the United States to Hong Kong, by the way, of all places, and telling China and the world about what the United States government is doing, not only to its own people, but to people all over the world. For those that don't know, the United States had launched a surveillance program through the NSA. It was monitoring its citizens, watching their calls, watching their emails, collecting their data, and this was a massive scandal. You have to understand that the United States had originally justified this 1984-like project on the basis that they were using it to go after terrorists, right? This is happening during the War on Terror. The War on Terror was used by people like Bush and Blair to push forward policies. I'm not saying there weren't terrorist threats. There were terrorist threats during this time. But a lot of the time, I think it was amplified or exaggerated in order to push through certain policies. And this is an example of that. Had the program just focused on America's enemies, then it may not have been as controversial. But the program went well beyond this. They started tracking people's emails and video calls and calls and text messages and everything. I mean, German Chancellor Angela Merkel was targeted. I mean, she was a US ally. And this woman was targeted by the NSA, man. This is crazy. Google, Facebook, Apple, and Microsoft were all complicit in enabling this. This caused shock, no place more so than in China. Now, this is a really big part of the story. For those that don't know, the Chinese tech company Huawei was targeted. Huawei is a massive company, by the way. For those that don't know, Huawei is for China what Apple is for America, I would argue. I mean, I think some people argue Huawei has a bigger global presence than Apple. I'd have to look into that. Long story short, Huawei is a massive company. And the NSA was caught trying to hack into their servers and spying on much of what was going on Huawei, right? So in an article published by Time magazine in March 2014, Foreign Minister spokesman Hong Lei stated that China was gravely concerned and demanded that the US give a clear account and stop similar acts. According to the NSA reports, they tried to install backdoors into Huawei's equipment and spy on other countries which China deployed its tech in. It's around this time that the recently elected President Xi Jinping begins looking elsewhere for technology. Up till this point, China had been incredibly reliant on the United States for both hardware and software. So for example, they bought their chips from Intel and then they would buy their operating systems from Microsoft or companies similar to Microsoft. You know, these markets had just become so interconnected, and yet Snowden's leak is in some ways the first real break, okay? They wouldn't reach decoupling yet. That would happen later, as recently as the 2020s. But Snowden's reveal is the first real fracture. And I want to just clarify, China had already been developing its own big tech companies before the Snowden reveal. So I'll show you a graph on the screen right now. You can see from this table that they'd already begun drifting away from companies like Google, Facebook, and Twitter prior to this event. Reasons cited typically included violating rules regarding censorship and unrest. China instead developed their own companies like Baidu, Tencent, and Sina. These were homegrown companies that had much better relations with the Chinese government. And yet, in spite of this preparation, China remained straddled, not because it lacked capital, but because it remained incredibly reliant on the United States for chips, okay? And this is the key product of this video: chips, microchips. Guys, if you haven't already, go check out Chris Miller's Chip War. It's such a great read. There are times when it reads like an espionage thriller. Honestly, there are a few stories in there that are very James Bondy. And it really does shed so much light on this Cold War between the United States and China, honestly. The Cold War between the United States and China isn't entirely similar to the one between the Soviet Union and the Americans. This one's a little bit different in the sense that it's more economic, it's more technological, it's less militaristic and ideological, as so far anyway. I mean, it could take on a militaristic dimension later as China grows its army. But yeah, right now I'd say it's more economic and technological than it is the other two. So I'm going to take a moment to just explain how crucial chips are. Practically every piece of technology used requires chips: your phone, your laptop, your washing machine, everything, okay? China has some really powerful companies, okay, like Tencent, Baidu, whatever. They're super powerful, but they can only operate if they have chips. And for a long time, China has been reliant on the United States and its allies for these chips. Now, you're starting to see China break away and become more self-reliant recently. But for a long time, China was very dependent on these people. China spent more on importing chips during the 2010s than it did oil. And that's huge, because think about just how much oil China uses. As of 2015, China remained dependent on the rest of the world for 85% of its semiconductors. So Xi's seeing this, and he realizes he needs to do something about it. There are some quotes which I'm going to tell you about in a second, the kind of things he was saying to his cabinet members during this time. But before I do that, let me just shed some light on the other players in this story, okay? The competing powers. Because right now it's been very much from kind of China's perspective, right? And rightly so. I mean, they had good grounds to be fearful of what they heard from Edward Snowden's stuff. But let's look at some of the other players. So look, in the chip making industry, you've got several really big players. You've got the UK, the US, Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan. China might sit on an abundance of rare earth elements, but the design and manufacturing of this technology really comes down to the US and its allies. You've got companies like Nvidia, AMD, and ARM who are amongst the very best in the world when it comes to chip design. You've then got countries like the Netherlands and Japan who really master the chip making tools, not so much design, but the tools that you need for chip making. Japan has DUV machines, okay, and the Netherlands, right? The Netherlands is the only country in the world. Their company is called ASML, and ASML is the only company in the world that can produce the EUV lithography machine, which is like a state-of-the-art kind of chip building machine. It's the only machine in the world that can produce chips that are 5 and 3 nanometers, right, which is the most advanced chip you can get. China doesn't have any machine right now. It can't produce its own EUV lithography machines, which means it is one step behind the United States and its allies when it comes to the leading edge chip. Now, there are going to be some surprises in this story. China's full of them, by the way. Every time people underestimate China, it pulls something out of the hat and proves to the West that no, we can do what you're doing just as well. I mentioned Japan and the Netherlands as the tool makers, but we also got to look at TSMC and Taiwan, right? So when it comes to assembling chips and actually manufacturing them, no place does it better than TSMC, which is Taiwan's most valuable company. If one of the most valuable countries in Asia, if not the most valuable. It's, honestly, this company is so valuable. It basically specializes in manufacturing chips. We've got to come back to Xi Jinping and how he's freaking out during the kind of early to mid 2010s. He's thinking, well, what are we going to do? We're so reliant on these geopolitical rivals for our chips and our technology. We've got to find a way of becoming self-reliant. And, you've got these quotes from Xi Jinping saying how control of core technology by others was China's biggest hidden danger. And that by allowing foreigners to control core technology, it was like building a house on someone else's foundation. In 2015, Xi takes it upon himself to declare Made in China 2025. This is a huge scheme, by the way. Okay, so Xi's now looking to invest over $150 billion in semiconductors over the next 10 years. So between 2015 and 2025, he does this with the intention on reducing China's reliance on the US and its allies on chip imports. Now, has he done that as of 2025? Not really. He's managed to lower it a bit. I think it's gone from something, it used to be like 85% reliance. I think it's come down to 80 to 75% reliance. Those are just rough estimates, by the way. So he hasn't delivered on his target, but he is gradually getting there. And as I said earlier, there are going to be a couple incidents where China suddenly reveals like a card which shows the West actually they're not as far behind as you think. They might be up to like a couple years behind in some key technological areas. When Xi first announces the program, though, there's a lot of people who are very hesitant to get involved. There's a lot of fears about China and its state-centric model. There's a lot of fears about the corruption going on over there. There's a lot of Westerners who just feel like Chinese-run business. This is during the mid-2010s, by the way. There are a lot of Western businessmen who just don't think China is going to be, these Chinese businesses are going to be efficient or they're going to be able to turn a profit because they're so reliant on the state. I mean, that's the conception a lot of these Western businessmen had. I mean, there's a quote here from Chris Miller's book, Chip War, where they asked a European tech representative, how do you feel about investing in China? And he said, when a Chinese firm said, let's open a joint venture, I heard, let's lose money. So these fears were very, very real. I found a report from the US International Trade Commission from 2019, and it said that China's substantial investments in its semiconductor industry were often inefficiently allocated. There are times when I actually look fondly on China's state-centric model. I think no channel makes the case for it as well as Geopolitical Economy Report. He makes a really good case for it and some of the strengths of it, but you can't deny that there are some weaknesses with it as well. And I think this I get that it's a US International Trade Commission report, but I think I don't think those things can afford to be false, though. I don't think they can be. So I think there's some credit in what they've said. I mean, and I don't think it's fair to compare China today to the Soviets. I think there's going to be vast differences. But if we learn anything about the Soviet Union, it was just how grossly inefficient that state-centric model was at times. During the mid and late 2010s, things get very, very real because there's this new character who comes in called Zhao Weiguo. Now, this guy's really, really interesting because, look, I couldn't find any direct correspondence between him and Xi. There is some evidence of them meeting, by the way, but I couldn't find any correspondence between them because I just can't read Mandarin or Cantonese. But from what I've read in the book, this is like Xi Jinping's man in the field. This guy starts going around and he starts trying to buy lots of different tech companies to help China establish itself as the most powerful technological power in the world. This is a guy who, works for the Tsinghua Uni Group, which is like this company that is involved in technology. And around the early to mid 2010s, this group is looking to get more involved in semiconductors and chips. And he gets off to a good start because this guy forms a partnership with Intel. You have to bear in mind that during the mid 2010s, US-Chinese relations are still very, very good, especially under Obama, who I'm going to elaborate on in a little bit, okay? Because Obama's approach to China is totally different to Trump's approach in China, in really quite comical and telling ways as well, in ways that I think you'd expect them to be. If I asked you, what do you think Obama was like with China, and what do you think Trump is like with China, I reckon 90% of you would just get the answer straight away, because it really is that simple. But anyway, look, before I get onto that, so let's talk a little bit about Zhao Weiguo, okay? So he strikes up a partnership with Intel and things go quite well. So what happens is Intel promises to provide him with wireless modern chips for his company's smartphone processors. And this emboldens Zhao, and within a year he starts going after companies like MediaTek and TSMC. For those that don't know, MediaTek is Taiwan's greatest chip designer, and TSMC is TSMC. Like, if you don't know what TSMC is by now, just go look it up, because TSMC is, like, as I said earlier, it's so valuable. And he starts trying to buy shares in these companies, and the Taiwanese, like, no, but bro, what are you doing? Like, this is a bit of a national security issue. And they tell him no, and he has to go away. And within a year, I think, he's going after an American company. Quick bit on TSMC, because this company's so impressive. What they did was, they were entering a market in which, Intel was already an established player in the world of technology before TSMC came about. And TSMC was looking at Intel, and they're thinking, well, how do we compete with these kind of companies? And the founder of TSMC basically said, how about we just take one aspect of the chip making process, and why don't we just do that really well? So what he decided to focus on was chip manufacturing, not chip design, chip manufacturing. Let other people design, and then they give us their designs, and then we manufacture the product. And over time, TSMC came to overtake Intel, because Intel was so busy trying to do so many different things like design, manufacture, everything. TSMC focused on one thing, which was the manufacture, and as a result, all the designers across the world started coming to TSMC to manufacture their chips. And TSMC starts to soar during the 2000s, 2010s. It's insane. Such a great story. But anyway, let's come back to Zhao Weiguo, because this is like the second villain in this. As the second villain, it depends who you ask. He's like the second hero or the second villain, depending on who you ask. In July 2015, he goes after Micron Technology, which is a US memory chip company. Okay, so this was going to be a huge acquisition. Had this gone through, this would have been the largest ever acquisition of a US company by a Chinese company ever. And he was offering $23 billion for it. But the United States get involved and say no, because it was a national security issue. Okay, even Obama knew that this could become a national security issue, and that's saying a lot, because Obama's approach to this entire thing was really chill compared to Trump. He keeps going for a long time. This guy Zhao Weiguo is like tireless, man. He keeps going. In September 2015, so like within a few months, man, September 2015, he offers $3.7 billion for another US memory chip maker, and again they turn him down. In 2016, he comes again. He goes after another company called Lattice Semiconductor, and he does this much more quietly, by the way. He tells the Wall Street Journal that this was purely financial, but within weeks, the company starts selling its shares, and there's a buyout offer from a California-based investment company called Canyon Bridge, which journalists from Reuters find out was being discreetly funded by the Chinese government. The United States gets involved, and again, they reject Zhao and China on national security concerns. And all of this is happening towards the end of Obama's time, by the way. Remember, Obama was very, I don't think think there was ever a globalist as Obama. But even Obama couldn't deny that there were some people becoming very concerned about what China was doing. It's towards the end of Obama's time that you got all these CEOs coming up to him and really kind of like just telling him, look, these Chinese CEOs, they don't mess about. They're coming for our companies, man. They're trying to buy our companies. And, you know, through some anti-competitive practices as well. You know, got to bear in mind that China is subsidizing its own industries. And that is not competitive. That's kind of anti-competitive. And this is why Americans are getting so annoyed. Now, let's not lie. Americans used to subsidize their own industries before World War II and stuff. I mean, there's no innocent party here, really, in the historic sense. But the problem now was that America was trying to create this global system in which states didn't subsidize their own industries because it was anti-globalist in a way. It wasn't fair. And yet here is China, a growing power that is subsidizing its own industries. And this was making many US CEOs very concerned. They're coming up to Obama and saying, look, you know, the Chinese pushed us out of the solar panel industry by simply subsidizing their industry. You got to do something. I'm not saying Obama didn't do anything. He went after a Chinese company called ZTE. He went after them for kind of alleged theft of intellectual property. He put some fines on them, but then he took restrictions off them once the company paid some fines. Obama's general attitude to the whole thing was, we've got to win the race by running faster. And I'm not even kidding you. That is the exact quote from the commission group of semiconductor executives working under him. So Obama's approach was generally, yeah, look, it's not great, but look, in a free market system, the company that simply produces the better product will win. So guys, don't worry about it so much, you know? Now, this is a radical departure from what Trump comes in, because Trump gets elected in 2016, becomes president in 2017. And his approach is so different. Trump didn't initially have a problem with China on the tech front. Trump comes in going after China for trade more generally. Okay, he thinks China's ripping America. Trump thinks everyone rips America off, but Trump was really adamant about China ripping America off. But however, he would eventually wake up to the tech danger because of some figures in his administration. There's this one guy called Matt Pottinger who's deeply concerned about China during this time. He's concerned about China creating backdoors to its technologies, much like America had done itself. He's very worried about America's allies buying technology from China. You've got to bear in mind that by the mid to late 2010s, companies like Huawei, they're not just selling products in Asia, they're selling products in like the West. They're selling. Do you remember in the UK when everyone's like trying to buy a Huawei phone? And it got blocked, and it's because of this, right? So Matt Pottinger's coming out and telling Trump, look, the Chinese are doing exactly what we used to do in the early 2010s. So why are we buying their technology? They're going to spy on us. They're going to collect our data. They're going to use it against us, basically. I know I talked about Huawei earlier, man, but Huawei's no joke, man. Huawei's a huge company. Huawei has an R&D, a research and development budget of 15 billion, man. 15 billion puts it alongside Google and Amazon, man. It's right up there with the biggest players in the world. As of 2022, the company has received $75 billion in subsidies from the Chinese government. Pottinger's looking at this and he's going, like, we got to do something about this. This is now a danger to our national security. Pottinger also criticized American foreign policy, which he believed had been hijacked by the tech CEOs who wanted to maintain a strong access to the Chinese market. You got people like Tim Cook and stuff during this time saying, no, we want good relations with China. Let's not provoke them in any way. But Trump isn't Obama. His mentality is much more zero-sum. When you tell Obama, like, oh, those people are picking on us, Obama's the kind of guy who goes, no, chill, we'll figure this out. We'll work out our differences. Trump's the kind of guy who goes, we gotta go and mess these guys up. And that's exactly what Trump does. After hearing about Chinese company ZTE and how they'd stolen intellectual property, he imposes restrictions on them. Puts restrictions on any US firm wanting to sell to ZTE. This was done quietly and almost without anyone knowing, by the way. Trump had to be sneaky during his first term because he was surrounded by people who didn't actually agree with him on a lot of things. In 2018, after learning that a Chinese chipmaker Jinhua had stolen trade secrets from US firm Micron, Trump teams up with Shinzo Abe and the two of them block the all critical chipmaking equipment to China. Within months, this dooms Jinhua's factory, leaves it unfinished, and the company's DRAM chip-making ambitions dead. Trump really doesn't mess about, and he goes even harder, by the way. So in 2019, Trump pressured the Dutch government to block their leading chip company, ASML. Remember the guys I told you about? The ones who made the EUV lithography machines, like the leading-edge chip-making machine, right? He asked the Dutch government to prevent exporting those machines to China. And this is huge because it hits Huawei so badly. Huawei was on the verge of making these new phones, the Huawei Mate 40, and this became for a long time, this became their last flagship phone because Trump basically prevents them from getting the leading chips that they need. When Biden came in, a lot of tech CEOs especially thought that things were going to be smoothed over, but it didn't. Actually, Biden doubled down on a lot of Trump's policies. Trump went after specific industries. So Trump put like restrictions and bans on places like Huawei and SMIC and other really big Chinese companies. So Trump, don't get me wrong, Trump starts this tech war, but Biden comes and he just elaborates on everything Trump does. He widens it. He puts like blanket restrictions on these industries. Biden placed roughly 850 Chinese institutions and individuals on America's entity list, barring them from gaining access to the United States' most advanced technologies. Companies like AMD and Nvidia were basically banned from selling their most advanced chips to China generally, and this is a common theme under Biden. American citizens were banned from working with Chinese chip makers unless they got special licenses. I think during the summer of 2022 that Biden announces the Chips and Science Act, which basically frees up $52 billion to have companies come to America to develop their chip fabs in America. And this actually, I criticize Biden quite a lot, but this seems to be working out right now. Big players like TSMC, Samsung, and Intel committed to build fabs in the United States and not China. I've got a graph on the screen right now showing you some of the countries that signed up to Biden's plan. A lot of these fabs are already underway, and these fabs are said to be, they're going to go on and develop some of the leading edge chips. So this was actually quite a good stroke from Biden. In 2023, Biden took things further by going after any US individuals or companies that were looking to invest in China. However, this period was not without its surprises. In August 2023, Huawei launched the Mate 60 Pro, which shocked analysts. Like everyone's like saying, like, how the hell did Huawei do this? I thought we blocked the export of our most advanced chips to them. And it turns out that the Chinese, using not EUV but DUV lithography machines that they'd acquired just before the ban, used these to still produce 7nm chips, which are still pretty good, and they still helped them. They gave them to Huawei to produce a state-of-the-art phone. So, and this is becoming a common thing with China, that yes, there are restrictions on them, but they're also finding ways to develop state-of-the-art technology through other means, okay? Maybe more costly means, but they're still finding ways of doing it. You saw this with DeepSeek in 2025, right? That took the world by storm. Everyone's like, how are they doing this when they don't have access to the kind of technology we have? And this is the thing. I think we're underestimating China. Don't underestimate China. China's a serious player, man. Biden's policies have also been met with some resistance as well. Towards the end of his time, Biden announced the framework for AI diffusion. The scheme split the world up into 3 sections, with tier 1 countries being allowed as many chips as they want, basically, so long as they met certain conditions. So they had to like respect human rights and so on. And there were some other conditions as well, which I'll put up on the screen. There's the tier 2 countries that had limited access to advanced chips, and then there were the tier 3 countries, the countries in red, which weren't allowed any advanced chips at all. Now this became a bit problematic because you get a lot of tech CEOs like Nvidia's CEO and many others like the CEO of Oracle, who come out and complain and say this is just, not only is this restricting our profits and the amount of people we can sell chips to and technology to more generally, but it's also putting these other countries in the hands of China. So you're kind of just shooting us in the foot here. As of early May 2025, Trump is allegedly rethinking America's commitment to the tier system. In an article published by Reuters, Trump is believed to be considering a more bilateral approach. I mean, in conclusion, who do I think has the edge? I think America still has the edge. If it worked with its allies, America still has the edge. They've got they're still the leaders in chip design. They still have control over the people who produce the best chip making tools and machines, like ASML with the EUV lithography machine. I get that China sits on top of a lot of rare earth elements, but in terms of the silicon you actually need for chips, you can find silicon all over the world. From the best of my knowledge, it's not like China has a monopoly on all export of silicon. So again, America, I think right now is in a stronger position. Now, China is taking steps to become more self-reliant. It might not be long before they produce their own EUV lithography machine. You know, it might not be long before they've already started developing more chips domestically with companies like SMIC and so on. They have brought that reliance number down. The question is, how much further down can they bring it? And also China, let's not forget, Trump's tariffs might end up pushing some countries away and into China's camp. And if he does that, well then, you know, I think Trump could have shot himself in the foot with that policy. I think the key for America is to work with its allies. Honestly, I just Trump's tariffs. I mean, he could be asking for companies to come to America and develop in America. And sure, I think thanks to Biden, that America could be moving towards self-reliance, even in chip design and manufacture. I spoke earlier about how fabs were coming to America and how America is becoming more self-reliant in chip making as well. But it's still not self-reliant enough to abandon Taiwan. Taiwan still produces 90% of the world's most valuable chips. So if China takes that or something happens there, it's still going to be a massive, massive blow to America and its allies who greatly depend on those chips. America is now producing some. It's not enough to make up for the loss of TSMC or Taiwan. America needs its allies, so I just hope Trump, whatever comes out of these deals, I hope it's good. I really do. Guys, many thanks for watching. If you've enjoyed this video, then do give it a thumbs up. If you're new here, subscribe. World Order covers all things geopolitics, macroeconomics, and tech. I do also do the World Order red and black labels for higher produced forms of storytelling, so do go check those out. And guys, yeah, let me know what you'd like me to cover next. And yeah, I'll see you all in the next video. Take care. Bye-bye.